Let me give you a little background as to how this bill even came about. We have Hurricane Matthew in 2016. We have Hurricane Florence in 2018. As members of Congress, anybody who's had a natural disaster understands what your constituency is facing, the challenges on so many fronts. You work really, really hard to address the unmet needs, get the funding through the appropriations process to address those needs. And then lo and behold, you find out that there's still people in need 3 years later, 4 years later, 5 years later, 6 years later, 7 years later, 8 years later. It's unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. Now, the number one program to address those needs, biggest dollar amount, is CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, Disaster Recovery Program. And when you dive into it, it's not too hard to figure out that the program's set up for failure. And keep in mind, you can't find this program in the statute anywhere because it's not statute. It's just directed. Every time we have an appropriation for disaster recovery, they just re-erect it. And it is rife with all kinds of bureaucratic problems. You have those at the federal level who say the holdup is at the state level. You have those at the state level who say the holdup is at the federal level, and they're doing this. And I'm tired of it. I'm sick of it. I've got folks, hundreds if not thousands of folks in my district and elsewhere in North Carolina who have not been able to get assistance to get back in a home that's not mold infested. This program is a wreck. It's awful. It is a disgrace. So real quickly, I think about how to handle this. And I said, you know what? The program's set up for failure. We need to redo this thing completely, start from scratch. Well, I'm a believer that states should have more authority than they do now on all these matters. We need to get as much bureaucracy out of the way at the federal level, get this assistance to the state level as quickly as possible. So basically, I set up a block grant program. They get 50% of their unmet need up front. No hassles with the federal government whatsoever. It's a pass-through basically through FEMA. Give them 50% of their money up front, require that their auditor, state auditor, or whoever the governor selects, do a review of the funding. They submit all that data back to the U.S. Congress, not back to the executive branch where it goes in some black hole and some bureaucrat who's got umpteen gazillion other things to do that day, can't get to it, but goes back to Congress where members of Congress are actually held accountable by their constituencies. It's simple, it's easy. And if people want to go to CDBG DR route again, they can go that route. There's nothing to hold them back from doing that, should this become law. But this, in statute, would provide a direct opportunity for our states and localities that are still suffering, and believe me, there are going to be many more disasters, many more storms on their way. This allows them a direct access to the money that they need up front to get these folks back into homes and repair and mitigate for future disasters. It's simple, it's easy, it's not complex, it's no bureaucracy to speak of. It'd be a vast improvement over what we have today. Let me put it this way. We get the federal government out of this business. That's the problem. You got all kinds of bureaucracy tying all the money up. You got the state that says HUD's the problem. HUD says the state's the problem. Well, I'm sick of it. You know, one of the benefits of this, if we get it into law and it actually is funded, is states will get their money and they can do with the money what they need to do. And you know what? If they screw it up, everybody's going to know who's screwing it up. Right now, you don't know because the state says it's HUD. HUD says it's the state. They just do this. It's a program set up for failure, which is why it's not worked. Again, I have a hurricane in 2016. I have a hurricane in 2018. Multiple storms in between and since then. And I still have people in mold-infested homes, believe it or not, who were promised help early, and 8 years later, still nothing. It is a disgrace. It's awful. Just awful. This is a reimagination of how this could work. Let's don't get bogged down in, oh, CDBG-DR has always been there, so that's all we know, and that's what we're going to continue with. It's a sinking ship. In fact, it's already sunk. It's just a lot of people hadn't realized it. It's done. This is a block grant to the states, gives the states the authority they need to address the needs of those who have been victimized by these storms and who here now are 6, 8 years later, still no help. It's as simple as that. Really simple. Block grant, states have the authority, Congress gets to check and approve the extra 50% of funding, or the final 50% of funding. If everything checks out, make sure states aren't wasting money, and you get it done. You get the job done. Instead of losing that money to who knows what, where it's not going to the disaster victims. That's the program we have today, the non-disaster recovery program. That's what's in law today, basically, or that's what's in practice today. I yield back.